the distractions, look straight ahead. I'm getting pushed sideways, off track instead. Look for the moment, nothing is real. I look for the magic when touch turns to feel. It's there right in front of me, seems far away. Is there any way I can go home? Here I am again, lake in Hennepin, thinking about life, the way that things might have been. Any way I can go home.
Hi everybody, this is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio. It's nice to see you again, and we have a neat show tonight that I've been looking forward to for a while because I wanted to do more with organic agriculture, and as some of you know, even though we've been diverted into some other connected things lately, I've been involved personally in organic agriculture since the early to mid 60s with Robert Rodale and other people that were involved in that earlier movement, and then I got involved with Alan Chadwick. I was his student for a while when I was a university student in the mid 60s, and we were doing organic gardening and farming and horticulture before USDA started deciding to take over the term, and it was an incredible experience. It really influenced me for the next half century and more. So now I'm still involved in that, and it's part of our health focus because it's a bare minimum, in my opinion, as when you're putting your protocol and your healthier lifestyle together, to at least don't eat anything if it's not organic, whether it's certified or not. You can know the farmer, know the gardener, and just question them intelligently about how they grow the food, and it's just as good as certified. But to turn the organic program of the government into a reliably positive thing, it has to not just be a slogan. It has to be supported by what the detailed standards are that define organic in their interpretation legally. So since Organic Consumers Association, we've had Ronnie on the show before, and that's one of the best groups out there, over 1 million people involved now, really working hard for replacing toxic agriculture with something that can regenerate the soil instead of use it up. I really wanted to get Alexis Baden-Mayer on the show, and I hope I pronounce your name right, Alexis, and she's the political director and has been for about 13 years, I think, in charge of a lot of important campaigns like trying to get the foods labeled, whether they're GMO or not, and things like that, and to get Congress somewhat out of their usual comatose state and actually relate to the importance of organic food. So I'm really grateful that you gave us some time, Alexis, and we got some important current things to talk about. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. So what I'd like to do, just to introduce new people, especially people that aren't totally familiar with all these issues, to you as a person, before you were involved in this stuff, going back as far as you feel like going, what brought you up to your involvement in this whole field of endeavor from before?
Well, I've always been very concerned about climate change, and that was actually the first thing that caused me to change my diet. When I was 16, I learned that the rainforests were being cut down because of cattle grazing and to cut down rainforests to grow crops to feed animals. And I read Diet for a Small Planet.
I remember that one, yeah.
And I read newspaper articles, and later I went back to find out who was putting out that information. And the campaign was called Beyond Beef. And that was actually a campaign that Ronnie Cummins, the director of the Organic Consumers Association, worked on at that time. And so that was my first awareness as a teenager, and this idea that we need to clean up our act in terms of food and farming, if we're going to save the planet and make sure that there's healthy food available for everyone. And then later, I began to understand the importance of organic. I always had an instinct for it, but I remember, again, another campaign the Organic Consumers Association was involved in that I was aware of as a consumer, that there weren't national organic standards. Now, Organic Consumers Association actually took the position that we should have state standards and have the states compete to provide the highest standards for organic food and farming. So we lost that battle, but I came on the scene with Organic Consumers Association in 2005. After working on some other good causes, I worked on industrial hemp. We just got a huge win in the Farm Bill for industrial hemp, so it can be grown all around the country. States may develop regulations as to where and how, but
if you can, without losing your train of thought, I like to really cater to the people who have no idea what we're talking about as much as possible, but would like to. So why does industrial hemp matter? I know it matters a lot, but not everybody's aware of that.
Well, hemp can grow so fast and has so much biomass to it that it's a terrific way to sequester carbon. Sequestering carbon is a process of photosynthesis. I think people understand the idea that forests are the lungs of the earth. So what the plants do, they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and they put it into the soil through sugars that they're feeding the microbiology in the soil.
Right.
Now, certainly a tree can do that. I think everybody understands the importance of trees to climate change, but all plants are doing this. And if we need to use our land to produce food and fiber and products for industrial uses, we should be using plants like hemp that can accumulate a lot of biomass and have many different uses.
Yeah, so what is hemp? Is it annual, perennial, or is it like a grain, or what is it?
It is it's an annual crop.
Okay.
It is a seed crop, a grain crop, so you can eat hemp seeds. Hemp seeds you have to take the shell off, but there's a very delicious nut inside. It's very tiny, so the mechanical process for taking the shell off of the hemp seed is modern. It's not something you can do easily at home. You can certainly easily press hemp seed for oil, and that is a very rich oil that has lots of omega-3s. It's a very healthy oil. And then it's a fiber crop. So there are long strands in the hemp stalk for fiber. The most common traditional use of hemp is to make rope. We certainly grew hemp for rope through World War II and beyond. And then ropes were replaced with synthetic fibers. And
wasn't there a time when the government in the U.S. required farmers to grow hemp because it was so useful?
That's right. There's the Hemp for Victory campaign. And there was imported manila hemp, and then that supply was cut off during World War II, during the war with Asia. And so there had to be a domestic supply. So industrial hemp is different from manila hemp, but it's also used to make rope. And that was the domestic supply of fiber for rope during the war effort.
Okay. So one of the good things about the Farm Bill that just passed is that they got rid of any restrictions on growing it. Is that right?
Well, they reverted control to the states. So I no longer follow this issue as closely as I did at one time. But my understanding from reading articles about the Farm Bill is that what's going to happen is states will be able to create regulations for growing hemp. I suppose if a state chooses not to regulate growing hemp, farmers can just do this without a permit. But because there is a physical genetic connection between industrial hemp and marijuana, some states are going to choose to regulate it to make sure that farmers are growing industrial hemp rather than marijuana. I suppose in states where marijuana is already being grown, it won't be so much.
It might not be an issue, yeah. How close are the two plants to each other, do you know?
They are related, but it's like the difference between a Chihuahua and a Saint Bernard. They've been bred for many thousands of years for very different properties. So
Okay.
marijuana certainly has a medicinal use. It has the high that people want to get from smoking marijuana, and that comes primarily from THC, although there are lots of cannabinoids. Industrial hemp has less. The legal definition of industrial hemp is having less than 0.3% THC, which is certainly not enough to produce a psychoactive effect.
Okay. All right. And back to what you were saying about your appreciation of generating biomass and putting it into the soil. At what point did you start becoming aware that it's not just pesticides that matter in organic, but actually chemical fertilizers as opposed to the regenerative techniques of farming?
Yeah, I think that I first became aware of that problem from work that was done by the Environmental Working Group, showing that the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, large areas of the Gulf of Mexico where no sea life can live because it's been there's no oxygen in the water.
Right.
The dead zones are caused by fertilizer, the runoff of synthetic fertilizers. And then there's also, we've heard more recently about the red tides in Florida. That's also a fertilizer runoff problem. So you can have fertilizer runoff or nutrient runoff from treated water, our wastewater systems. So it's a compounding problem. We've got lots of sources of excess nutrients going through our waterways. But the prime reason is actually growing corn. We grow corn for ethanol. We grow corn for animal feed. We grow corn for high fructose corn syrup. Most of these things we don't really need corn for, and yet we're growing tons of corn, and it's being hyper-fertilized to increase profits for mega farms, and that's washing into the dead zone. But of course, this also kills the natural fertility of the soil. The natural fertility of the soil is this process of photosynthesis. The plants are drawing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They're turning it into sugars that they feed to the microbiology, and the microbes scavenge for nutrients in the soil to exchange with the plants. So to get your micronutrients, your mineral nutrients, you need this interaction. And so you can't have true nutrition in food without this natural process. And the chemical fertilizers, the synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, certainly cut off that process.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's a lot of people, even the ones who a while back read Rachel Carson and the other writers like that, they are focused on pesticides, and they might not have the understanding that the main thing that makes pesticides look necessary to avoid crop failure is fertilizer. Because when you fertilize and destabilize the soil, then insects and disease come in to get rid of the inferior plants, right? They're not doing a bad thing, actually. And then the chemical company can say, look, if we don't spray poison all over this food, then everybody will starve to death.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point.
So, and I know Organic Consumers Association is pushing something called regenerative agriculture right now. So what is that?
Well, we borrowed the term from the Rodale Institute, and you mentioned you've done work with that with Rodale, with J.I. Rodale?
Robert mostly.
Okay.
But I mean, J.I. was still alive, but Robert had taken over, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah. So I think it was J.I. Rodale who first coined the term regenerative agriculture. And regenerative organic agriculture. And so that shows that even back then, when organic principles were first being developed and organic farming methods were being shown as an alternative to what was the new form of farming, which is chemical farming, that was new at that time, there was still a need to distinguish between regenerative organic agriculture and organic, or you could see it as a descriptive or a distinguishing term. So it's a good descriptor because certainly when you do not use chemicals, then you have to do lots of things to increase soil fertility. So we've got this process of photosynthesis. But you also have to add soil organic matter. You have to add compost or manure compost to increase the fertility. You have to grow lots of different plants. You have to have biodiversity so that you have these different interactions between different plants with different soil microbiology. And then you have a more complex system in the soil. You increase the fertility that way. You have to make sure that the soil is always covered. You can't leave the soil bare.
Right.
And you need to minimize tillage. So those are the four aspects of regenerative organic agriculture. So
Okay.
this is regenerative organic agriculture as opposed to what's practiced today in industrial agriculture or industrial organic agriculture, where you have input substitution. You decide, okay, so I want to get the USDA organic seal. I used to buy this type of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. Now I need to buy an organic approved fertilizer. But we've had things used like waste products from industry, like corn steep liquor has been used as a substitute organic fertilizer to substitute for synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. So we have to, so that's how we use the term today. It's not, organic isn't just the absence of synthetic chemicals in the production cycle. It's the use of these biological methods to increase fertility rather than relying on input substitution and just doing the same type of monocultures of crops in the irrigation system.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you mentioned animal manure as our primary input for the soil, and I totally agree with that. I think it's very valuable. But now, because of the GMO issue, most manure in this country is actually very detrimental to put on the soil. And so if you go down to the garden center and buy manure, it's likely to be a not good thing to buy at all. And even though it might be organic from the carbon point of view, it's not organic from organic farming point of view, right? So you have to find an organic manure source.
That's a very, very good point to raise. And on a farm scale, on a commercial farm scale, the best way to do this is to rotate animals. So to have a diverse farm, not just in terms of the crops that you choose to grow and your crop rotations, but to have animals in the mix. And that also is so productive for the farmer. I've seen Gabe Brown speak, and looking at his charts for how he makes money as a farmer. Well, that's because he's using one plot of land for all of these multiple uses. He's using that plot of land to grow vegetables. And then he has, I'm not a farmer, so I don't know exactly his method, but he has, different animals come and graze that land.
Yeah, some kind of a rotation, basically. Huh?
Yeah, so that the pigs and the lamb and the chickens and the beef cattle, they're all using this land at different points of the year or different points of a longer term rotation, so that you have fantastic soil fertility with all of this animal activity. And as a farmer, then you're growing lots of things that you can take to the market. I mentioned I started out as a vegetarian because I thought you had to be a vegetarian to save the climate and make sure that there's enough food for everybody to eat. But increasingly, I'm seeing that farmers, organic farmers, regenerative organic farmers, that put animals into their cycle to increase soil fertility are really doing a wonderful service to the environment.
They are, but you know what? Even if you're a vegetarian, animals can really fit in quite well to the whole thing, because in a natural environment, if you want natural fiber, for example, and you've got are they coming and picking you up as a terrorist yet? Just watching the screen.
I'm afraid I just happened to be at a spot where an ambulance has pulled up. So far, no one has asked me to. So I'm hoping everything's okay.
Okay.
But I apologize for the noise.
Let's watch and see what happens. That's all right. So what I was saying is that even for vegetarians, if you want to use wool and the fur from llamas or alpacas, and or if you want organic raw milk, for example, which I found to be a superfood, That's why they tell you it'll kill you, because it's so good. And those animals all have manure, and as long as you feed them organic feed, then the manure's safe, and it's really good. But on really large tracts of land where the amount of animals is not quite enough to do the manure for everything, you can do quite a bit by growing the green cover crops, right, and then cutting them. Not necessarily plowing them in if you don't want to. If you want to minimize tillage, but if you mow them, and what I found is that if you bring rock dust into the mix, then the growth increases dramatically. It really, I don't think it's gotten enough exposure. I mean, manure's been talked about for thousands of years, but not so much rock dust, and it's incredible what it can do too. So I totally agree with bringing the animals in. I think that's great. And what you start to see is it's a beautiful environment to live in as a farmer or somebody who works there. Farming has become a real dangerous profession.
Right.
You know, and it didn't used to be that way. So it would be nice to have more young people get interested in careers in agriculture, right? I think one of the problems is we're told that it's great progress for one farmer to feed 10 million people now, right?
Right.
So nobody has to do the terrible work of farming.
Right, yeah. Yeah, we've been very inspired recently by the movement in Congress for a Green New Deal. And one aspect of this proposal is a climate change proposal. So it has goals set where we're going to go 100% renewable by 2030. We're going to become carbon neutral by 2030. But the way it lays it out, the system that would produce these important climate change goals includes things like a green jobs guarantee. So
what does that mean?
Well, that would mean that you could go to your neighborhood federal jobs office and see what jobs are available in the green economy. And certainly you're going to see solar installation and retrofitting buildings to make them more energy efficient, but also community gardening and land restoration. Could be just like during the Works Project Administration in the original New Deal, these important community food security objectives could be met through a federal green jobs program, and certainly in rural areas as well.
So who pays for these people's wages to work at those jobs?
Well, we would have to have a progressive system of taxation.
Okay, so basically they have to raise taxes to do that.
Well, it really depends, because also creating jobs stimulates the economy. There are good figures on how much wealth it brings to your community to create jobs. So I think that you would certainly stimulate your tax base. But yeah, there are, for instance, Social Security taxes. There's a point at which I think the cutoff is, say, I don't know the exact amount, but say $250,000. So nobody who makes over $250,000 is taxed on their income past that point. So we don't actually tax rich people. You know, Warren Buffett has written a lot about this. He's one of the richest men in the world, and he has even advocated for more progressive taxation, saying that considering his wealth and resources, he can avoid taxes, but his secretary has to pay them. So,
right. I've heard that too.
Yeah, we have different ways to restructure our taxes to make them more progressive. We certainly need to start taxing the fossil fuel industry, because the market, and this is for their own good, the market needs these indicators. Because right now we're seeing the market yo-yo, and we're seeing the price of gas and other energy, fossil fuels yo-yo as well, because nobody can figure out exactly the point at which we're going to start devaluing our fossil fuel resources, because it's not safe to burn them. Humanity will have completely disappeared before we burn our last lump of coal. We have way too many fossil fuel resources on the planet, way more than we could even burn if we wanted to. So at a certain point, we have to figure out how much less these fossil fuels are valued in our markets. And a good way to stabilize the fossil fuel markets is to put a price on carbon. And then investors and the market can slowly see how these things are going to be phased out over time. rather than having big spikes up and down in the cost and value of fossil fuels.
I guess I hope you don't mind getting into all this economic stuff, because I find it really interesting. I think it's relevant. It affects everybody's life, and I'm totally in favor of everything becoming green. I just like to see a way to do it without massive government control of everything. I think that's a real big mistake. And if there's a way to do it naturally so that jobs happen because of the market, which I think could actually, instead of the government just taking everybody's money and giving it to these good causes, I'd like to see more intelligence go into it so that you do things that would, for example, end the government collusion with toxic companies, like so that you just can't have GMOs. It's a crime to produce them, right? That's the end of it. It's just over. And the same thing with all the major pesticides that destroy the earth. What if those were all illegal? Then in order to make money, private companies, which have lots of it, would have to do things that were organically acceptable. And yet it wouldn't cost the government anything. And when they talk about the taxes as being, they use the word progressive, and it just really sounds good, because everybody wants progress. But what if you're allowed to make as much money as you want with almost no tax, but you're not allowed to do it in a way that kills the environment or kills other people or poisons the food or poisons the water? So some of the industries, like the fluoride industry and the really toxic fertilizer industries and things like that, become totally illegal. And there's just no chance for a company to make money on that. And I just think these kind of incentives where it costs you nothing as a taxpayer, but you're kind of funneled into something that you go ahead and make as much money as you want, have as much freedom, as little regulation as you want, but it's illegal to make money doing something that will destroy humanity. I mean, it seems like that would be good to consider.
Sure, I like your idea just as well. I think both proposals require getting corporations out of our political system and having a true democracy where people have the power. And once we get to that point, then we can have these debates about what's the best way to go about it.
Sure.
Can we organize the market so it can run on its own without harming human beings?
Exactly.
And provide,
Well, a start would be to make certain things totally illegal.
We're all for it. We've advocated for that for a long time, and on a certain level, I realized that I'm speaking to our members in my rich white woman voice, and I'm assuming that people have the agency, that they have the power, that they can just walk into a Whole Foods and buy whatever they want, and they'll make these choices because they can.
And to remember that Whole Foods sells fresh GMO corn, and just because it's called Whole Foods doesn't make it, good. Yeah. You have to be really careful in there and buy the good stuff, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
But yeah, the demand changes.
People who are prevented from accessing the healthy, organic, nutrient-dense food that everybody needs to be healthy.
Because right now it's more expensive than the chemical food, right?
Well, and people have low wages. There are 22 states where Walmart is the number one employer, and Walmart's employees have to access food stamps because they're paying.
Yeah, I know. Amazon is the same thing. And what I see I'm not saying I'm right about anything. This is just throwing out ideas, okay? So it's not like which approach is right or anything. I'm just saying we're all on the same team. Yeah. And one of the things I think we want is as close to total freedom to live our lives as we want, as we can possibly get. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that, this is a lot about semantics and language. Yeah. And language has been used as a weapon to brainwash society for a long time, because you can control the people and you don't even need bombs. And it's very powerful. One of the things that I think works against us, and we get fooled into thinking that it's great, is democracy. I'm completely against it. And the reason is because in a real democratic system, and they haven't had this in many places, the majority rules. Right. What it's always called is the people running things. Like, in the old USSR, it's always for the people. And the thing is that if you brainwash the people, such as we have now, we're living in really mind-controlled society, and everybody votes for GMOs, and if it's a democracy, guess what you eat? GMOs, no matter what you think, because that's a democracy. But if it's a constitutional republic, and the Constitution is written to make you free and preserve your choices, even if you're a minority of one person, you can't ever be forced. I think that's a lot better, because what they're doing now is they're making the majority really push for mandatory vaccinations, mandatory chemotherapy, taking your children away if you refuse, making you eat GMOs, protecting the chemical industry. Those things are being done with the support of the majority of people. And if they were to vote on it in a pure democracy right now, organic would be over. And I think organic's important to preserve and protect. And if you just have it by vote, you don't know what's going to happen. But if you've got certain principles, and if your Constitution's not a mess, and it's actually written for the individual, not the good, not the greater good, not a pure democracy, then you are safe. And it's just semantics in a way, but I think that people see anything that the government says or the indirectly supported government things say, this is democratic, this is progressive, this is liberal, stuff like that, which the media is really pushing right now, then whatever it actually is, people will support. And they're not thinking too much in depth what this would do. That's why I was saying, if you can get everything green without taking the money from one set of people and giving it to the others, which is the basic platform of the Communist Party to do that, the progressive income tax and everything, it's actual planks in it to do that. Because what it does is it eventually reduces everybody to the same low level with an elite group who say they're for the people, controlling everything you do to make it fair. And I think what was really neat about this country is that they trusted individual freedom. And I think that would still work, but we don't have freedom now, and we've got government corporate collusion. And as long as it's involved, we have no chance.
Have you ever had Thomas Lindsay with the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund on your show?
No, I'd love to, though.
He's really fantastic, and I think the work that the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund does goes directly to these issues of how to best form a constitutional democracy. And there are two important principles that Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund works for. One is for the right of local communities to decide what's going to happen where they live.
Yeah, so that would be great.
Most of the battles right now, actually, since they have a democracy school, I went and took their democracy school. I'm a lawyer, so I've been to law school. And I took a democracy school, and I learned a whole different legal history than I had been taught. And it's the legal history of corporations taking control, where communities are deprived of the rights to decide what's going to happen where they live. And that, it started with one early example was the railroads. The railroads were going to expand west and connect everybody from coast to coast. And who got to decide where the railroad went? If you were a farmer, did you get to decide if the railroad crossed your land and disturbed your pasture and your grazing areas? So farmers tried to stand up and say, well, thanks, that's a great idea. I need a railroad to take my crop to market. But our community would like to decide where that railroad goes. It shouldn't just be the quickest, easiest, cheapest route for the railroad. It's got to have a service to the community.
So that was an early example of eminent domain, basically, right?
Right, yeah. And so that's where things started to go downhill, when we decided that corporations had rights, but communities didn't. So the first thing is communities getting to control what happens where they live. And the second thing is endowing nature with rights. Because like you said, when you have a democracy, the community votes, the community gets to decide.
That's right.
For the river, if the community decides they want to dump their trash or their waste in the river, who speaks for the river? Why, if we're going to, we have to decide that we value natural...
Or the future generations of humans too, right?
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, there are definitely important principles that you have to have entrenched within your legal system if you want to have a functional democracy that's going to protect the world that we want to live in.
Two of the factors that really skew the view of the whole thing, I think, is one, when we look at, for example, raising what people should be paid, like minimum wage, for example, that if you still have a functional supply and demand market, other things will come up so that your ratios will still be the same. And sometimes the other factors that are huge influences on making people unable to buy food are completely missed. And I think one of the biggest ones Ron Paul talked about, for example, is that there's this massive criminal organization that we think is keeping us safe from environmental or economic fluctuation. It's called the Federal Reserve, and it's mostly foreign-owned. It's not part of the government. It's above the law. It's siphoning out everybody's wealth gradually, so that since it was formed in 1913, they've managed to remove 98% of the value of a dollar. And no matter how much you raise wages, if you leave the money as worth 1/50th of what it should buy, it's not going to work. And those guys aren't even investigated. So I think they're in the category of Monsanto and people like that. The other thing is, and if we think, well, that's not practical to address, well, then it's not practical to survive. It has to be addressed. And I haven't seen anybody in Washington of any party that is really prepared to be attacked as much as you would be attacked if you're willing to look at that. So.
Yeah, well, one aspect of the proposed Green New Deal, which is not fleshed out, the Green New Deal is a demand for a select committee which would come up with a 10-year plan to address the climate crisis. But one of the few things that's mentioned in there is local community-controlled banks.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yes. So money is a tool, and we need to make sure that money is serving the functions that it needs to serve in our community.
Exactly.
Rather than,
right now, people are slaves to the money instead of the other way around, right?
That's right, yeah.
And what they call inflation is actually theft, and it really was enabled by taking away the silver and gold backing. Because as long as it was a warehouse receipt for a certain amount of solid asset like gold, you can't have inflation. It's impossible. And the value stays stable. When they took that completely away, it meant that we're actually under the tyrannical control of the central bankers, and they actually control the government. And I think that would be good to change.
Yeah, it would be great to have more community-controlled banks, and then we have money that serves human interest.
Right.
Serves human need, rather than money as a system that funnels wealth to at the top of the system.
The other thing that I find problematic with the whole climate change issue is that if humanity wants a really nice, stable climate to live in, within the normal changes that happen all the time, because climate's never unchanging, but you really shouldn't have huge fleets of aircraft spraying toxic metals in the sky in order to change normal climate, which is exactly what's happening. And there are clouds that have never appeared before, not because of you're not turning your air conditioner off, but because they're spraying right into the storm systems, changing the west to east wind flow patterns, causing the droughts in California. I worked with one of the chief scientists who was investigating the whole geoengineering program, which is openly admitted now, and it was denied for decades. Started in the 90s in large scale. And we watched the storms come in off the Pacific, and fleets of planes came in to block them every time. And they've been causing the whole weather problem in California. The explosive forest fires are because of dumping metal dust on the forests. Nobody will talk about it. And we've seen it on radar, tracked the whole thing. And this is man-made climate change on a scale that you or I could never do. And as long somebody's paying for those fleets and that activity, and it's worldwide now, And I've actually tracked it all. We've got high definition footage of nozzles fitted on the aircraft spraying out, while the news media says it's a conspiracy theory. It's not. And, before we talk about restricting our own activities and saying we all have to live in austerity, wouldn't it be reasonable to stop that activity first?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about what you were just describing, but certainly in the broad category of geoengineering, it's just not necessary. And
it's counterproductive and harmful.
It's
one thing it's causing is climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're literally blocking rain, and they're redistributing it, and they're using it as a weapon, and none of us are supposed to know. And I know, you're not supposed to talk about this publicly because everybody's afraid to, but once the evidence is all there, and if your goal is not the program, your goal is the result. So if we really want this green world, seems to me like we need to cooperate on this kind of thing.
Yeah, we should have a ban on geoengineering. It's just too
Yeah. It's becoming a career path in universities now all over the world.
Yeah.
And right at the same time as they say, well, it's not happening, but we might have to dim the sun, to save us from global warming. And the sun is kind of important for the biosphere, right? I mean, you don't have photosynthesis or life without it. And it's currently dimmed about 22 to 30%. That's really catastrophic. And I don't hear any of the green movements talking about that enough. I think that should be like right at the top.
Yeah, it's not something I'm an expert on, but I did read the article about a scientific experiment to imitate a volcanic eruption.
Right. They want to spray sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, which I'm sure that couldn't cause a problem, right?
Right. Yeah, we could just have crop failure.
Yeah, but we wouldn't notice it because we'd die first, so it'd be great.
Mm.
Anyway, in the future, I mean, if there's any way that I can share some of the information we've got on that with you, I see this as fitting into the green philosophy. Because if you work on the Earth's surface, to do the things you can with like outlying GMOs and normal things that should be done right away,
right?
It seems to me, if you have these planes spraying millions of tons of poison over the entire Earth, even organic farms are no longer organic. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be good to reverse. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be asking you about these things, but I just want us to work together and solve these things like soon, not in 1,000 years. So
sounds good.
It seems like we could do that. Now, at the same time, as all those things are being worked on, the government's definition of organic is really critical for everybody, right?
Yeah, we see three disturbing trends in organic. One is factory farmed organic animal products. The second is synthetics being the source of nutrition in organic food. And the third...
Wait, say that again. Synthetics being the source of... Say that again.
Nutrition in organic food being
So what does that mean?
So instead of having natural food-based nutrients in your food, they're adding synthetic nutrients like DHA and ARA, for instance. Okay. And those have been approved for use in organic. And you'll see children's foods, milk, and kids' foods marketed to parents, actually saying DHA and ARA are important nutrients found in breast milk, and they enhance brain growth, or it's like brain development.
Okay, so Alexis, you brought up a number of, I think, really important points that one of them I wasn't even really aware of. I hadn't thought about it, and that was synthetic ingredients acceptable in in organic food and called organic according to the official definition. And one thing I wanted to remind people who are watching us is that this is not an entertainment show. We're supposed to be entertaining, but the main point of it is that you can learn really important things that can be put into good use in your life. And the reason it's nice to know what government's doing is because it tends to control your life and drive it in a certain direction. And we're supposed to have an input into that to keep it positive. And that's one thing that OCA does really well. And through Alexis and her projects especially. So now we're going to get into talking about what Congress defines as organic under the organic program. And I think it would be good to go back just for a minute too, for people that don't know, which most people don't really, and look at the history of the organic program when it started. And my feelings about it are mixed, and you can let me know what you think about this. That when I first knew that it was developing and I watched it, and we'd been doing organic farming and gardening for a long time before that without a problem, and without, nefarious things coming in like you're talking about to confuse it. The reason I was suspicious of it is that the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is supposed to be working for our great benefit, is one of the biggest supporters of pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and GMOs on the planet. And if they start the organic program, the people working in it generally that I've met are really good. But the reason at the top management level of a program, of a group that supports GMOs and all the chemicals, starting an organic department, should be very questionable to us. And we, at the very least, I think somebody like what you're doing has to help keep it in line so that it becomes productive. But let me know what you think about that.
So Organic Consumers Association got its start in the late 1990s when the Clinton administration was putting together the rules for the National Organic Program. The organic law was passed in 1990, but it took a long time for rulemaking and implementation. So it wasn't until the late 1990s, and then finally in 2002, we had the first regulations completed and things were actually certified USDA organic. So at that time in the Clinton administration was the first major crisis for organic. I think that it had all been pretty positive until then. You had state standards come up, you had people adopting organic methods, marketing organic food, and then the 1990 Organic Foods Production Act is a very well-crafted piece of legislation that had a lot of respect amongst the organic community. I think obviously got a lot of good input from people who had invented the first standards across the country, Oregon Tilth, etc. So there weren't any major problems until around 1998. And at that time, the Clinton administration proposed a rule for organic that would have allowed sewage sludge, irradiation, and all sorts of other things that simply do not belong in organic. And that was the first major threat. Now, my thoughts on it are, I mentioned earlier that the Organic Consumers Association initially did not support the idea of doing a federal regulation. It seemed to make more sense to keep regulation at the state level and have state-based certifiers compete with one another for the highest standards. And then as a shopper in the grocery store could say, well, I know Oregon Tilth has the highest standards, so I'm always going to look for the Oregon Tilth seal. And that would have raised the bar. What happens when we get to the federal level is it's much, much easier for the big multinational corporations, the agribusiness interests, the pesticide companies, the GMO companies to influence the federal government. And they run the show. On every issue that I work on at the federal level, it comes down to what big business wants. It's very, very difficult to not slide backwards when it gets to the federal level. The innovation comes from localities especially, but from the state level. But when you get to the federal level, the agencies are captured. That's the terminology. You have captured agencies.
Okay, so tell people what that means too.
Yeah, so you have an agency that's supposed to regulate an industry. That agency gets captured by the industry, and the industry ends up writing the rules on how the industry should be regulated. So
how does it capture the agency? You can imagine this industry coming up and just catching so how do they do it, practically speaking?
Well, they have the experts. They have the lobbyists. They have the people, the lawyers who can draft legislation. And it's very convenient for the agency to hire these lawyers, put them in charge, then it's very convenient for the industry to hire back these folks when they've decided they've done enough government service. So we have the revolving door. That's one way. One famous example is Michael Taylor, a Monsanto lawyer and lobbyist. He gets hired by the FDA at the moment that Monsanto's first GMO, the recombinant bovine growth hormone, RBGH, genetically modified growth hormone to make cows overproduce milk. So he's lobbying for this new GMO, the first GMO to enter our food supply, and then he gets hired by the FDA to decide how to regulate it. So his lobbying materials are then used as federal regulation. So it is scary when your issue gets to the federal level, what can happen to it. And so the first big crisis was at the end of the Clinton administration. Luckily, the organic movement was ready to react. People were still in activist mode. You know, the industry was very young. People had invented something beautiful, and they didn't want to see it destroyed by federal regulations. But the worst didn't happen at that time, and the organic regulations that created the National Organic Standards Board, everything seemed pretty fair and workable. But over time, it's just been chipped away at. And on everything that's important, we've had small losses that have ended up adding up to the erosion of organic standards. And that brings us to the three big problems that I raised earlier. So we've got the organic factory farms, we've got the organic nutraceuticals, where the nutrition is coming from synthetic nutrients. And then the third major problem that's a new problem, just happened in the last year, is that we have soil-less growing systems approved for organic. So those three things have gotten to us to a point where organic is not what the consumer expects in these areas. So when a consumer buys organic eggs, they imagine that the chicken was raised outdoors, where the chicken can scratch and peck and eat worms.
Yeah, and the farmer has 10 chickens and they're all really happy. Right?
That's right, yeah. And what we have instead is take Herbrex. The Cornucopia Institute has done fantastic investigations of the organic egg industry, and they have a scorecard. So if you're interested in finding out who produces eggs the truly organic way and who's just an industrial factory farm producer who happens to feed their chickens organic feed, hopefully. But I think we've also had scandals recently in organic where we've had grain coming into the United States under false certifications. And there's no doubt that illegal, false organic grain, so supposedly organic grain under false organic certificates, that is definitely going to these big organic factory farms. So we don't even know for sure if these chickens kept in these gigantic sheds, hundreds of thousands of chickens in one building, if they even got organic grain at this point.
Right, so and if they don't, it could be saturated with Roundup, even if it's not GMO, right?
Well,
because they can dry out the stalks of the grain.
Not in organic. No, that's not allowed in organic.
No, but I mean, if it's coming from overseas and they don't know if it's honestly organic.
Oh, yes. So certainly the stuff that it came under a false organic certificate is no doubt GMO and sprayed with tons of Roundup. That's how they found out, because there were some conscientious certifiers in Europe who were actually testing the grain to make sure that it didn't have pesticide residues, just in case. And they happened to find that yes, this grain had pesticide residues, and then they started an investigation that revealed false organic certificates. So we've got this horrible problem of organic factory farm animal products. That goes for eggs, it goes for milk, it goes for ruminant animals. We've got a standard for ruminant animals, how much grass they have to graze on for how much of the year, and it's minimal, but that's supposed to be the floor, and organic certifiers are supposed to require producers to go beyond that. But we know that there are lots of organic milk producers that aren't meeting even the minimal requirements now. And again, that's Cornucopia Institute's great work. And then the last problem is that the National Organic Standards Board decided that it's okay to grow organic produce without any soil at all. You can do a hydroponic system.
And that's in place now, right? I mean, there are organic hydroponic tomatoes in the store.
Yes, but you wouldn't know. I mean, you could probably guess. your hothouse tomatoes that are coming from Mexico in January are probably grown in a hydroponic system. Same with bagged lettuce or anything that you can tell is hyper industrialized, out of season. That could be coming now from a hydroponic system or aeroponic system where there's no soil. And so the argument that the industry made for this was, we've been doing it since the 1990s. We've been complying with the organic standard. So there's no difference between what we do and what your soil vegetable farmer does, somebody who's actually growing in healthy soil. Now, I beg to differ. There's not a lot, I've searched, and there's not a whole lot of good research on this, but I think that organizations like the Bionutrient Food Association, they are now developing better ways to test the nutrition of produce in the grocery store. So I think that we're going to be seeing some exposés on this. We will be able to discover what's grown in a soilless system and why it has less nutrition than something grown in healthy.
You know that Sir Albert Howard was writing about this stuff in the beginning of the 20th century and explaining that when the plant is in the soil, there's a bridge between the root hairs and the minerals that is made up of these fungi that transfer the nutrients from the mineral particle to the root hair, and that none of that ecosystem exists in hydroponics.
Right, yeah.
So they know already, yeah. I mean, even if science hasn't recognized it.
That's right. I mean, they're just, who's paying to test the nutritional difference between hydroponic organic and soil-grown organic? Like, there wasn't, before this crisis, there wasn't a need for that. Now there are a lot of people in the soil-based organic world, which is a crazy thing to have to say and distinguish.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're actually farmers that grow
the old-fashioned ones that use soil, right?
Right. Yeah, it's like now there's a major need to show consumers that this produces healthier food. But it's obvious, and I'm sure that data will be available shortly. But those are the three big things, and they're pretty big things.
Those are really big things.
Yeah.
Besides, even if they show the difference in nutrient levels, that's different from saying the hydroponic growers will lose certification.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and there's not... So as a consumer at this point, like I said, you could guess, you could use your smarts to figure out what's likely hydroponic.
Right.
On the other hand, it's not labeled, and it's not that we have a majority of people right now who buy organic when it's available, when they can afford it. The Organic Trade Association has been keeping statistics on this, and most families do buy organic food, but most families aren't diehard organic people. They're going to do it, and it works when it's convenient. And so the idea that we're going to have a mass of consumers, figuring out whether something is hydroponic or not, or whether it has synthetic nutrients in it, or whether the animals were raised in good conditions, out on pasture, in sunlight, it's just way, way too much for the consumer. And we still have this concept of food needs to be cheap. So Costco is a huge seller of organic food, but Walmart is the biggest seller of organic food now. And so most people are buying, they're trying to get a deal, and they don't realize that when they look for a deal, they might be getting less than they're expecting. They might not actually be getting what they're paying for. And then when people find out, it's not like if they don't have a strong commitment to organic in the first place, they're just going to say, oh, I was duped. I should go back to buying conventional because there's probably not that much of a difference. So we're just creating this horrible vicious circle that's going to end up reducing demand for organic, and unfortunately, we may be plateauing. We were growing in organic by double digits. Now we're growing by single digits. It's still amazing.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the Organic Trade Association keeps these stats as well, and I believe the last one that I saw, organic grew by, say, 7% in the last year. The food industry as a whole grows like 1.5%, a minuscule amount, because we can only eat so many calories, right?
Yeah.
Where our food industry really shouldn't be growing at all. We should all be eating the same amount each year, but the industry shifts a bit. And
I don't think most of the people realize the connection between organic versus non-organic food and their healthcare program, because that difference is their healthcare program.
Yeah. And if people
they're
did
not
realize,
told.
We wouldn't have diabetes. We wouldn't have a lot of the developmental issues in kids, allergies. I mean, it's hard to prove this with scientific evidence, but we can prove it with our lives. And people who do have challenges for health for their kids, they figure that out. That's how we get our members.
Right.
Moms surfing the internet, trying to figure out what's going on with autism. Is there anything I can do for my kid's diet that might make some improvements? That's what's happening, and it's sad that it's getting to that point where, and I don't think everybody knows how to do this. I don't think I would know how to do this. If I was in that situation, my kid was sick, I don't think I would have the mental and emotional energy to figure out, what the exact opposite of what my doctors are telling me, which is just put them on pharmaceuticals. But
there are people. This is so interesting. I mean, we could talk for months on this alone, and maybe we'll do another episode too if you're really interested. But what I would say in response to your comment there, there's so much depth to the meaning of what you just said, because there are people that have figured this out.
Yeah.
Okay, I spent most of the last half century putting that all together, and these things are almost all completely reversible. You're not allowed to say cure anymore because it interferes with the management business program of the drug companies. But in reality, almost all this stuff is completely reversible with no invasive or poisonous means at all. And it's just that doctors, especially, who have come out and said that, suddenly they all commit suicide. In really bizarre ways that can't be done by a normal person. So there's a certain chilling effect that is the reason that this information's not out there for everybody. It's not lack of research. It's suppression. And it's not only Congress that's captured. It's medical industry as well is captured by the drug companies and the people making the money off injecting you with things that they say will make you really healthy and can't get sick after that. And what's in the injection, you're never supposed to look at. Right? I'm not saying the V word because I don't want to get banned right away, but that's just an example of repression.
The V word. I'll speak for myself and say that I did not vaccinate my second child. And luckily, I had no major health problems with my first child. So it wasn't from a crisis. It was just from learning information from the National Vaccine Information Center and their
NVIC.
NVIC. There actually is a lot of credible information available on the risks of the vaccines. And the example that I always use, and I use it as an example when I'm talking about other issues, as an example of what corporations do when they are faced with serious liability for the injuries and deaths that their products cause.
Make a deal with the government.
Exactly. We have the reason why vaccines are dangerous is because we have a special vaccine court, and if you're injured by a vaccine, you don't get to sue in a regular court. You go to the vaccine court, and if you are awarded damages for your vaccine injury, the industry does not pay for that.
Right.
The taxpayers do.
But you do have to memorize that they're safe and effective. It's just that they've paid out $4 billion now for people that have been injured and killed.
Wow.
And that's with 1% ever finding that court.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's not easy. Yeah. Seriously. Yeah. So there's Yeah,
So I mean, this relates to everything that you're saying.
Yeah, it does.
Because the medical and the agricultural industries are almost analogous to each other.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the same companies. I've been researching Bayer now because Bayer owns Monsanto.
Exactly.
We have our Millions Against Monsanto campaign still, because I don't think people are going to forget right away.
You got to change it to Billions Against Bayer, right?
Well, we do have Billions Against Bayer now. So I was looking up. Oh, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal about Bayer's legal strategy as they face 8,000 cases of glyphosate, Roundup, Monsanto's Roundup herbicide exposed people who have developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And they have, as it turns out, the Wall Street Journal reports that Bayer has a lot of experience dealing with product liability claims. And this is not part of my everyday work. So I just Googled the names of the drugs that they listed, like fertility, not fertility, but, if you don't want to get pregnant.
Right, birth control stuff, right.
Like, oh, geez, it's just horrible. And, and it's not like they've got 8,000 glyphosate cases now. They have tens of thousands of cases for all sorts of medical devices and drugs that they have marketed in the United States that have killed and injured people. And they are very experienced, and they have easy ways for their lawyers to rank the cases, to pay out for the most sympathetic cases, the ones that would really get a jury.
Right.
And then to bury, to aggressively defend against the weaker cases and bury the evidence of those cases that settled out of court. So, but it's just, the pharmaceutical industry and the agribusiness industry in a lot of cases really is the same company. Bayer is a great example, but there are lots of other companies like that.
Right.
Not lots, because there aren't that many companies, but...
Yeah, and it's not because they're corporations. You could start a corporation to do something good tomorrow. It's because the individuals starting those corporations are using them to shield responsibility for malicious action. And it's usually not because they don't know better. It's because they have a plan, and it's specifically malicious.
That's right. And that in the case where there was a school groundskeeper, Dwayne Johnson, his nickname is Lee, so Lee Johnson, he was using Monsanto's Roundup. He developed a horrible form of non-Hodgkin lymphoma that resulted in skin lesions all over his body. It was such a horrifying situation. And this went to a jury. They wanted to do anything they could to help him.
Yeah.
They found evidence in that case through the internal memos of Monsanto. They're discussing this. This is what they do at work. They talk to scientists. They talk to the lawyers. They try to make a good decision, and they balance how much money they can make. and the jury found that what they did was actually malicious in a legal sense, malice in the legal sense. That they knew
pre-planning to do something that causes harm, right?
That's right. Yeah, just a really high standard. It's really hard. It doesn't happen every day that corporations are found to be giving people terminal cancer on purpose when they know scientifically that this is what's going to happen. Although it makes sense. I mean, it's a great business model to cooperate with the medical industry too,
because that's a big money maker on that side.
Yeah, that was one of the campaigns that we participated in. There's a group called Breast Cancer Action. And when Eli Lilly bought Monsanto's bovine growth hormone, RBGH, the Breast Cancer Action came out and they said, wow, you take something that causes cancer and you sell it to a company that manufactures anti-cancer drugs.
It's perfect.
Wow, they will make money forever.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So
that's the kind of thing you're dealing with Congress and coming up with their definitions. It's not all benevolent.
That's right. Do you just want to reinforce this idea that for anybody who might think, oh, well, shucks, I got duped buying organic and it's not everything I thought it would be. It's still, even if you buy the worst organic, it's still so much better than the best conventional.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not soaked with herbicides that give you cancer.
Yeah.
And it's not GMO. And we do have cases where there's fraud, but it's minimal. It's compared to what you would willingly ingest if you bought regular conventional foods. So I definitely don't want to dissuade anyone from buying organic. Just buy direct from a farmer if you can.
When you can, yeah. And otherwise, do the best you can, know the source, and buy it when it's still fairly fresh. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know people who say, well, there's smog, anyway, we might as well smoke. And it's very similar. It's saying, well, there might be fraud in organic, so let's just buy this. This semantic thing and using words as a weapon again, when they somehow get to call food conventional, that sounds just normal.
Yeah.
That you should read poisoned on that food, right? Mm-hmm. And why do you want to buy food that's guaranteed to be poisoned, instead of organic that's probably got a good chance to be really good?
That's right.
And I've been in times of really low money, and if you understand that, it's not a question. You just eat less. If you don't have the money, you buy the best food and don't buy more than you need.
Yeah, we eat beans and rice at our house when
whatever works for your body. Yeah.
Yeah.
But thinking that, well, I'm going to save money by buying something that is going to kill my body, it's not extremely logical.
Right.
Right. So anyway, didn't mean to interrupt, but in getting into the National Organic Program, you got all these forces working on it, just like the forces you described in the board meetings at Monsanto, now Bayer. And it's easy to... A lot of this gets into psychology, that the public, we've all been trained to have absolute trust of authority. And that if we have a good system, so the people in it obviously are totally selfless and working for our benefit around the clock and stuff like that. And that answers most questions. But if they're not, that just means you have to question everything. And I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed by that. And it seems like the implication of your work is that, well, because of how things are in the real world, you have to question everything. Unless you want to just sacrifice your body and more.
Honestly, I get all of this information because this is my profession. I get to work on this day to day. I am more of the non-questioning type of person. I want to find a source that I can trust and go with it. So I go to the farmer's market every week. I meet with my farmers. I buy almost exclusively from one farm.
Okay.
And, that doesn't work totally. I have to buy some things at the grocery store. And certainly when things are out of season, I have to do that.
Sure.
But you want to keep it simple. That's why we're Organic Consumers Association. It is buy organic. It's still the best thing that you can buy in the grocery store, and then make relationships with farmers directly so that you can so for one, so you can support a small scale family farm, because it's one of the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest problem in all of agriculture is that farmers do not get paid what it costs them to produce our food.
Exactly.
Every single bite of food we take into our bodies is an economic loss for the family farmer. And sadly, that is happening in organic now, which used to be closer to the cost of production. It used to be a way for farmers to make a decent living. Now we're seeing the industry squeeze the organic farmer as well. And until we can get a market that does not do that to farmers, it's a lot to ask for farmers to do the right thing.
Yeah, it is.
And
a lot of it is the education of the public too, right? Because if the public realized this is real healthcare, this is what you really think you want for your kids, are they important? Obviously, you support organic farming all the time, every day. But I think people are told GMOs are cutting edge science, and the chemical fertilizers are feeding the world. And I mean, I'm just suggesting that maybe a lot of it's education, that the market would be bigger, more supportive if people knew how important it was.
Definitely.
So what's going on in organic definitions right now, I think, which is where it kind of started in Congress, is that I guess is it still being debated? What or some big thing just passed? We've talked about that. What's the status right now of the latest developments in important definitions?
Yeah, so Congress just passed the 2018 Farm Bill. They only pass this law once every 5 years, and it sets agriculture policy for that term. And it determines how we spend nearly $90 billion on food and farming over 5 years. Or over 10 years. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
So it's a big piece of legislation. And there was so much controversy this year. The Republicans initially passed a bill that would have severely restricted poor people's access to food stamps. And so the Democrats were so relieved when they could pass a bill that didn't have these food stamps cuts. So people did not scour this bill to find out what might be wrong with it.
In other words, that was not the only issue, right?
Yeah, so something, unfortunately, organic is something relatively small. And we didn't get the attention that we needed on this issue. Because for one thing, the bill we had two different versions of the bill, one in the Senate, one in the House. Then it went to the conference committee, and the conference committee has one public meeting, and then they secretly develop the language. So it's very difficult for the public to have any input. And you never know what's going to happen.
And they could have input and it could be ignored, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everything happens behind closed doors. And then they put the language of the bill, they give the language of the bill to the public and to the people who are going to vote on it in the Senate and the House. This happened last week on Monday night, 10 p.m. So the final bill is released. It's thousands of pages.
And you're supposed to read it all by the next day or something?
Exactly, because the next day, the Senate voted, and then the next day, the House voted. So
none of them had read it, most likely.
Right, yeah, less than 2 days. And so you have to, now that's where the lobbyists come in for the corporations. And they say,
don't worry, this is what it means, right?
Exactly.
We're telling you the truth.
Right, it's all good for organic, because they did some things that address organic fraud. And so positively, it's good for organic on the whole.
And they're not going to mention the things that are really bad, of course.
Right. So what my organization was so upset about was something that completely got buried, and people wouldn't understand its importance anyway, because it's very arcane. So the question is, how many votes do you need to allow a synthetic substance into organic?
Yeah.
And we have a volunteer board representing the cross-section of the organic community, 15 people. And on that board is about 10 people from industry and about 5 people who represent the public interest or who are scientists or a small-scale farmer, perhaps. So you have probably 10 people who are with big business and 5 people who might be open-minded or might want to represent consumers or small farmers' interests.
Okay.
So we have a rule that you have to have 10 people on the board to allow something that is not organic into organic. And that's the main purpose of the National Organic Standards Board.
Right. And why would you even consider allowing something non-organic into organic anyway?
Well, yeah, that's a whole long story that we fought bitterly, and that was happening right when I started at Organic Consumers in 2005. We had a big discussion over that, but we lost, and it came down to secret language inserted into an appropriations bill in Congress by the Kraft lobbyists. The lobbyists from the Kraft. Yeah, so it's all very ugly history. And so the same thing happens again. So we had this process. You need 10 out of 15 people on the National Organic Standards Board to allow a synthetic into organic.
Yeah.
And then it's there temporarily. It's there for 5 years. Then you have 5 years for the industry to figure out how to use a natural version rather than a synthetic. And so it will automatically sunset in 5 years unless the board decides to put it back on the list of non-organic substances allowed in organic. And the old way of doing this, from the law, the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990, they said you need 10 out of 15 people to put it on for another 5 years. And this idea was that we're going to improve organic, because in 1990, there probably were a lot of things that you needed to use that weren't available in organic form, like thickening agents and emulsifiers, basic things that you need for processed food. And at that time, I was saying, well, do we really need so much processed food?
And even if you do, can't you just do honest packaging and say it's this % potentially toxic material and this % organic? And that would have solved a lot of it, right? Because people would know.
That's right. And if you're in the know, you can know. So something that has a USDA organic seal has to be at least 95% organic. Something that says made with organic ingredients has to be 70% organic. And when I learned that, I was kind of happy. I was like, wow, that's, it's a pretty high standard. So when something says like made with organic tomatoes, like a pizza that's made with organic tomatoes.
Right. Everything else could be toxic.
Right, but it's actually 70%. So it's not just that it's got the tomatoes, it's 70% organic.
But it really matters what that other 30% is, right?
It does, and that's where the national list comes in, because that 30% or that 5% is limited to these things that have actually been approved. So it's not the worst system. But what happens over time is the National Organic Standards Board meets twice every year, so every 6 months. And every 6 months, somebody comes to them and says, I really need this non-organic substance in organic. And every 5 years, you have an opportunity to correct that and go back and say, well, do we really need this still? And the idea is that it goes back and forth, it ebbs and flows, but it would maintain some constancy. And over time, you would see less non-organic things in organic. But what they did with the Farm Bill this time is they said, no, we're going to change this. You needed 10 out of 15 people to put it into organic. You need 10 out of 15 people to get it out of organic. And that's where the problem sets in, because the board is specifically by law designed to have 10 people from big business and 5 people from the
coincidence, right?
Interest side. Yeah. And so you might get 6 votes, to take it out. You might get 6. But
if one of the industry people defects and goes crazy temporarily and votes for something good.
Right, because their company figured out a better way to do it. A lot of companies compete in the marketplace. When we were raising hell about carrageenan, there were a bunch of companies that said, we'll use xanthan gum instead. It's like there are multiple options, even for organic handlers and processed food companies. There are different ways to do it. So if you take one substance out, you can probably replace it with something better. And then there are all these companies that say, oh, look, I made an organic version. For instance, soy lecithin wasn't available organically. Now it is. And so you have all these people trying to participate in this process of continuous improvement. But now, after this Farm Bill, that's over. Once you get your non-organic substance into organic, it's there forever. Basically, it's never going to come out.
Wow.
And so that's the situation we've got. And it's not quite the end of the world, but it's not the end of organic or the end of organic
the world's
integrity.
Still out there at the moment.
But it's definitely setting the stage for hyper industrialized organic. And if it didn't already have problems in organic, I probably wouldn't mind. It's like if it would, they say that it provides consistency and predictability. And that the substance you're using today, you can use 5 years from now, and you can use 10 years from now. You don't have to worry about changing your product formulations or changing the way you farm. But we do have big problems in organic. The factory farm problem, the synthetic nutrition problem, and the soilless problem. And with those three things, just think, like, what does the hydroponic grower, what kind of synthetic nutrients do they need to grow zucchini? Maybe there isn't hydroponic zucchini yet. Maybe they need something new synthetic to produce organic hydroponic zucchini. It's like it's endless. And
right, because everything could theoretically become hydroponic eventually, right?
Exactly. Like right now it seems like it's just a few items like berries, greens, lettuces, tomatoes.
Yeah.
But yes, we could have lots of different types of hydroponic and lots of different synthetic nutrients that these plants need to grow without soil. And so we're just, it's clean, in the sense that it's clean because it wasn't sprayed with a carcinogenic pesticide or a neurotoxin. Right. But it's not organic in the sense that it's building organic matter in soil to have a biodiverse, living, organic system. It's right,
not which human health happens to require.
Yeah. So there's now a movement for real organic, for regenerative organic. These are both becoming certified systems that you can go to. So if you're already certified organic and you want to prove that you grow in soil using regenerative methods, you can get real organic certification. You can get Rodale's regenerative organic.
And this has no connection really to government, right? This is private certification.
Well, it's probably going to be connected in the sense that you already have to have a government accredited certifier to do the USDA organic part. And USDA organic is owned essentially by the federal government now. You can't get a organic certification. You have to have USDA.
Right, but if you don't call it organic, if you call it regenerative, that could be independent and private, couldn't it?
Yes, that part is. So the real part is going to be independent and private, and the regenerative part is going to be independent and private. So we're going to have these initial certifications. But I think in a way that's positive because producers need it. And consumers need it. I need this information, and the farmer needs a way to tell that information to me. But in my opinion, this is a disaster. It's never going to have the reach that USDA organic does.
Yeah,
and we're basically giving USDA organic to the Walmarts and the Costcos and the General Mills of the world, and saying that we're going to accept this niche market that's never going to have the same reach.
Yeah, that's a good point. Almost nobody by comparison is ever going to hear about regenerative compared to USDA organic.
Yeah, so I want to still fight for USDA organic. I feel like there is a chance we can, Senator Stabenow from Michigan is the one who's behind this. And that's because she has massive egg farms that call themselves organic in her district that produce millions of eggs. Like the biggest egg farms you can imagine. They're not like there's no industrial or conventional or chemical based egg farm that's any bigger than these organic egg farms. They are true factory farms. And they're in Michigan, so she represents them, and she feels obligated to her constituents. I don't know why she doesn't care about her people, but businesses and her.
They don't pay her as much, I guess.
Yeah, but there's a new crop of Congress people, especially Congresswomen, coming up that are a little different. They're a little less corporate. They're a little less sold out, and they want to make changes. And so I'm hopeful that Senator Stabenow, she won't be the chair of the Agriculture Committee forever, and maybe we'll one day get an Agriculture Committee that is just all paid off by Monsanto. Like right now, the Democrats and the Republicans, they take money from the same company.
Both of them are totally owned, right? Both sides.
So we don't see a big difference in agriculture policy in Congress.
And it's been that way for decades, you know.
Yeah, but there's a small group of House members right now. Congressman Blumenauer from Portland, Oregon, he's the best example. He's been the most active. But Congresswoman Pingree from Maine, she's fantastic. She's an organic farmer.
Wow,
and
that's
and
nice.
They have a small group that always do the right thing on food and ag together. And they're all members of the Progressive Caucus. And I think that if we can get at least, well, the Progressive Caucus now represents a majority of Democrats in the House. So if we could at least get the Democrats around the Progressive Caucus to understand these food and farming issues, to understand organic, we can start to make some headway. I think we went to Congress with issues like GMO labels and organic before we had built power in the food movement. But I think that we have been building power in the food movement slowly over time, and it's still not significant enough to go up against the corporations. But I think that as this younger generation comes up and enter politics, I think we're going to get more sophisticated about food and farming. And that's really exciting to me. There's a lot of talk about the new congresswoman from New York. Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she was able to beat the fourth-ranking Democrat in the Democratic primary in her congressional district. The fourth most powerful Democrat, completely corporate supported, running the show, but she beat him through people power. She only raised, a fraction, like 1/8 of what he was able to raise, and he didn't even consider her a worthy opponent. So there have been changes made, and she's one of the new young women coming into Congress who understands that food and agriculture are connected to so many things, certainly connected to our healthcare system,
right?
Certainly connected to climate change. And she did an interview with Bon Appetit magazine where she laid this out very simply, very quickly, and you can totally see that she gets it. And food and farming is not one of her big issues. She's representing a district in Queens where I'm sure there are a lot of community gardens and people who care about these things. But she didn't make it a big campaign point, but she gets it. So I think that we're going to see this critical mass of Congress people who understand our issues grow slowly. There's another congressman from California, Ted Lieu, who has been a good watchdog on what the EPA has done with glyphosate. He's ordered Environmental Protection Agency investigations over collusion with Monsanto. So we're getting some good oversight, and he just got into the leadership in the House. He's got a position on the communications committee for the Democratic leadership. So I think like slowly our folks who know these things really well are rising up in the leadership and creating critical mass, and hopefully will become a majority of at least the Democratic Party soon. But there's also a small cohort in the Republican Party of foodies who love, some of them are farmers. They love food issues. They love good food. They want to take these values to Congress and represent their constituents. So it could happen actually in both parties. I'm pretty hopeful.
Yeah, that would be great. In fact, there's two responses I have to that. One, just short mention about the EPA. A lot of their regulations are just to harass people. I mean, they have fined and imprisoned people who have tried to collect rainwater, stuff like that. They ought to be, making sure that people are protected from companies like Bayer and all the other ones that are destroying the earth as fast as they can. But the other thing that I heard they did recently is, their policy on treatment of, you mentioned biosludge, right, from the sewage treatment plants. They don't want it treated. The policy is you put it right on the land. And it's full of drugs. It's full of all this incredible pathogens and contaminants. And Mike Adams just did a great documentary about it. That this is actually the policy. I don't know who they're indebted to that they did that, but they're putting it in brands like Milorganite and things like that, and selling it to the public, where you shouldn't even touch it with your skin. And it's getting into the food and water cycle. And I think there's some work needed on the EPA. Yeah, I know you can't spend 1,000 hours a day, but there's enough to do stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to just mention is that when you look at a bill like the Farm Bill, it's got some positive things, right, and some negative things that weren't talked about. When you're working on that personally and part of your job, how do you have time to even read what's in it? How do you do that?
Well, I open it up as a PDF and I scan it as well as I can for keywords to try to figure out what's in there.
Okay.
It does come with a summary, and the summary is accurate. So you can look at the summary and then go back to the text and check the text against the summary.
So who writes the summary? Who writes the summary?
The staff people who work on the conference committee or the agriculture committee. So it's, I've never seen a situation where the summary was misleading. I think that they, so far, so good. The staff people do their jobs.
That's good.
But that doesn't mean that, like most members of Congress, I mean, just like me, it's like I knew what I was looking for when I read the organic section. That's my expertise. I can read that. I know what the law says today, and I know how these words will change that. So, but I can really, like for the Farm Bill, I can only read certain sections like that. It's even other things that I'm very interested in, like the Conservation Stewardship Program. It was very difficult for me because the language in the Farm Bill was that the Conservation Stewardship Program would be repealed. And yet it was reported in the press that it was being merged or folded. That it actually would still exist as a separate program, but $800 million, I think each year of its money would be removed and given to a different program. That's the Environmental Qualities Incentive Program, which primarily subsidizes polluting factory farms.
Right. The title is not necessarily anything related to the content of the bill, right?
Yes, unless you're an expert, unless you've already read the law and you're familiar with it, it's very difficult to read the legislation and understand how it's going to change the current practices. And then you have to know what money has been appropriated each year, because the Farm Bill authorizes money. Some of it is guaranteed and permanent. Some of it is optional. Like you might have this money available, but you might not, depending on appropriation.
And some bills are blank checks as well.
Can be, yeah. So it's pretty challenging to have a handle on this. It requires, like, I've been working at OCA for 13 years, and I still have trouble with it. So yeah, the idea that the people who vote on this understand all of it, they don't. And that's why it's so clever of the Republicans to say, we're going to cut food stamps, because all of you have constituents in your districts who will suffer. And then you become an expert on that, how many millions of people are going to lose their food stamps.
You mean as a distraction?
Exactly. Yeah. And then you don't bother learning about what else is in the bill. But
it's like a magician who says, look over here, right? Yeah. What if the people writing these bills were I know this is unrealistic, but what if they were actually trying to just use minimal words, concise language, no words of art, and just really say what they wanted to propose? How long would that Farm Bill have been? Okay, guys, so that was Alexis Baden-Mayer, the political director for Organic Consumers Association, doing a lot of important work. And we had a lot of technical issues of getting cut off because she was losing her phone that had the Skype on it, and I apologize for that. And her time is up, and she had to leave, and her phone died again. So sorry about the kind of awkward ending there. I apologize, but she brought up really enough important points for us to talk about for a long time to come, and major issues that are going on. I just have a couple of closing comments on what she was saying. I think the very last thing when she got cut off the last time was that these bills are so long and written with such complex language and what they call words of art, which means a word that seems to mean one thing, and the lawyers writing it design it to mean something completely different, to find it somewhere obscure in the bill. So you pass what you think is something good, and it serves the people who are trying to undermine in this case, the integrity of the organic standards. One thing that I would like to see, and I was trying to ask her when we got cut off, is what if these bills were written by people who were actually trying to do something good for the country? I think if they wrote them with minimal number of pages and words, and to try to be concise so that the average person could understand it for exactly what it meant. That's how it should be, and I think it's supposed to be that way. And originally they had a clause, I think it was in the Constitution or in one of the supporting documents, and it said a law would be what they called void for vagueness, which meant that if the average person couldn't understand it or got misled by it, that it would be void. It wasn't even a law, and I think that should still be followed. The other thing is that, not that my saying that makes any difference, if you have people in government that are just there for the highest bidder and they sell themselves for whatever corporate interest wants to control them, then suggestions don't matter. But one of the things I think that came up in a lot of what she said was about the Republican and the Democratic parties being, opposed on all these issues. And the Democrats, as I personally, I think it should not be a partisan issue about organic food. Anybody that is in a mammalian human body that needs to eat food, whether they know it or not, have the same interest. They need the food to be super nutritious, organic, natural, and clean. And that doesn't really change if they think they're a Republican or a Democrat or a conservative or a progressive. That's all totally irrelevant. And yet we see these groups splitting up along party lines, and the so-called progressives, which I think is a real misnomer because it's used to, it's basically a socialist, communist type, left-leaning term. And but anyway, for some reason, they're the ones that are able to understand and support the need for organic food, which I think is great. That's a good quality, and a lot of the Democrats have that, and they appreciate the radically important nature of keeping the food supply organic, supporting small farmers, all that. A lot of the Republicans don't have any clue about the importance of real environmental issues, and they're notorious for supporting big corporations that are producing some horrible toxin, but then so are the Democrats on that too. As a group, most of them support 5G and all the wireless stuff that is hurting children in schools. A lot of the Democratic leaders have vast amounts of money and multiple huge mansions while they go and make speeches about how bad rich people are, and total hypocrites with some exceptions. And if you wanted to stereotype the Democrat approach, most of them don't have a clue about how economics work, or if they do, they're suicidal. Because like the one that was mentioned, Ocasio-Cortez, open socialist leaning in the communist direction, and like Bernie Sanders, and their policies on the economic level are complete national suicide, malicious national suicide, and they're completely closed-minded to being educated, as far as I can tell, on what's wrong with that. Why can't you put the good points of both parties together? Because some of the more libertarian-leaning Republicans seem to want sound money, shut down the Federal Reserve, which should be a top-level priority for anybody that wants to save their country, not just in America, but every country that is controlled by a central bank like America is, like the U.S. is. that should be top priority to get rid of that, right? Andrew Jackson knew about that, but not too many people talk openly about it now because it's like one of the head mafias controlling the whole country, and the people that know about it are mostly scared of it. Anyway, I just like to see this constant fighting between these two superficial allegiances, Democrat and Republican, be dropped, because it's so late in the game for the world that wasting our last available time in deciding whether we're going to survive or not is probably not brilliant to be fighting about Democrat versus Republican talking points. The Republicans need to drop the idea of supporting these huge toxic corporations, industries like the Internet of Things, the chemical fertilizer industry, so many of them, nuclear power industry, the pesticide and GMO industries, the drug and vaccine industries. Those are all deadly for all of us, and none of them were necessary ever. It's just that we're not supposed to know how available and developed the alternatives are. Right now, both parties are fighting about the energy stuff. You know, the typical Democrats want to support wind and solar, which has good intent, I think, and I support them too, except they're not really clean and viable as much as they're said to be. But there are real clean and basically free energy technologies that you're never supposed to mention, that are not supposed to be available. If you look at the work of Dr. Stephen Greer, he explains that these have been fully available for at least the last 100 years. And they're violently suppressed with murder, and just like the real health information is now, that's the real government policy. And so it shouldn't be a fight between wind and solar versus oil. Each of those has its good points. Oil is already set up. It's got an infrastructure. It's convenient. It's not in short supply. It's probably not the primary factor in climate disruption. That's geoengineering. But both of these are missing the whole point. Clean, environmentally sound, free technologies are available right now. They're all being suppressed by the government and industry partnership that has absolutely nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. So what I would like to see from this whole discussion is for people to drop the party line of what party they have to belong to and look from a completely different point of view. We're all on the same side. Stop hating the other side. Stop condemning them using, severe language to say how stupid they are and everything. That's not your best use of energy. There's humanity on this planet. Dr. Greer had talked about going from a type 0 or a level 0 to level 1 civilization. I don't even know if we're up to level 0 yet. That's where we all want to kill each other. We may not be that evolved yet. But the level 1 is where somebody thinks, like in the movie Idiocracy, except coming out of it, they say, wait a minute, maybe it's not really brilliant if we just all kill each other on this planet. And at the same time, the people on the left-leaning side, the Democrat side, the socialist side, need to wake up to the fact that socialism is national suicide, like communism, for any country that it's in. And just because it's like a Democrat brand now, it's really stupid to give any priority to that. Giving priority to what works and what supports individual freedom without intentional harm to others. Who cares what it's called? Things that support those criteria should be adopted by both supposed sides of this argument. So I noticed that Alexis said there are a lot of Democrats who understand and support the need for the environment to be taken care of, and the food supply in particular. But you mentioned Ocasio-Cortez in New York, who has either no clue about economics, which is kind of important for the survival of your country, or she knows and she's evil. And I tend to think that she doesn't really know. She's being used as a pawn of people who do know and are evil. And there's really not time to fight between those superficial sides. Understand the way economics really work, get rid of the central bank that's stealing from everybody of all parties, and create the conditions where the free market creates prosperity, and as a side effect, incredible charity from private organizations, so you don't even need it from government. And then there's no big tax requirement. You don't have to steal from the so-called rich people, who are the ones left that are making a decent amount of money. Raising the taxes isn't going to affect the truly rich, the trillionaires at all. They don't even operate in their own name, so don't even think about that. Raising taxes is hurting ourselves. You know, that's what the current president is really smart about, but he's supporting these toxic companies like the stereotype Republican, and there are ways to make lots of money where you don't have to do it by hurting anybody, and I think, why not make that a common interest? So, you know, either we keep fighting in these arbitrary divisions like Democrat and Republican and liberal and conservative, or, as they say in kind of a cliche way, come together like the Beatles song, you know, and not exactly like that, but in a real and positive way, and realize what are the issues of humanity. You know, obviously, no matter what party you're in, you should support securing the borders completely. No illegal immigration. That does not make you a racist or a hater of anybody at all. It's so that you still have a country, right? It's that way you can do things in your country to be an example to other countries, and they can do the same thing. And then all the prosperous countries who have thrown out the central banks can cooperate for the freedom of their own people, instead of adopting these stupid issues because they're supposed to belong to your party. You know, if the stereotype Republican wants to have no compassion for people that are on welfare or truly poor or disabled, that's ridiculous. Why adhere to a party line that's anti-humanity? And the same thing on the Democrat side. Common sense is sacrificed in the midst of all that, and either we get it back, or we're going to have to try life somewhere else, because it's not going to work on this planet in time. You know, there are people that are supporting the extinction of life here, and that's truly their goal. And I know that's too scary for a lot of people to understand or even consider, but that's what's going on. And the only way to turn that around is not to stay unconscious, hypnotized zombies and be busy condemning and hating everybody. We're connected to each other. Michael Jackson tried to sing about this all the time. You know, stop hating the other side and start realizing we all have the same interests, and we have a lot of intelligence and creativity if it can be withdrawn from the fighting mentality and brought back into cooperation and respect of everybody's freedom. You know, you don't, like the typical Democrat stereotype wants to solve it with total government control of everything to make it all fair and just and safe and wonderful and some version of utopia. Well, that's never worked in history. It's never going to work, because the people who get into the position of complete control are the worst ones. And they're going to take care of you really well, but not in the way you think. So people on both sides need to just shake off the programming, appreciate each other. Our time is limited to make life on this planet still viable. I think it could still be done, but it has to be done with cooperation, freedom, and mutual respect. And I just would suggest that we start to do that sometime very soon. Thanks for being with us, and I urge you to really look at all the things, great points that Alexis brought up today, and the fact that she would give us time at all on Lost Arts Radio as the main lawyer for OCA's projects, like ones she was talking about, is incredible, and we should appreciate it. And I appreciate your time very much. You got a lot of stuff to do, and hope you're having a good holiday season and the rest of the year, and stay in touch with our shows, because we've got there'll be more free videos coming up on the major platforms. If we get kicked off there, it'll be on brighteon.com, brighteon.com. Great new platform to replace YouTube as soon as necessary. And if you want to really get into the deeper levels that I can't talk about too much on these public venues, you can go check out planetaryhealingclub.com if you're ready to do some internal work with yourself. And our Sunday news show also is a little bit before the club meetings. Or no, that's on Saturday, 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. That's a free show, public, and you're invited to that too. Anyway, nice to be with you again, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Introducing Lost Arts Radio Live, our new Saturday late afternoon, early evening 1-hour live stream show. This new show precedes our Planetary Healing Club, which starts at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. The Planetary Healing Club, which is not free and open to the public, but you can join for a minimum donation of just $10 a month. Our new live stream show, which is free, starts Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and 4:30 Pacific. It can be accessed by going to lostartsradio.com/live. You can tune into our live stream from our Facebook page at facebook.com/lostartsradio, from our YouTube channel at youtube.com/lostartsradio, as well as both Periscope and Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. You can ask questions during the show by using the chat function on YouTube or make a comment on Facebook during the live stream. Once again, that's Lost Arts Radio Live, Saturdays at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. As of January 2018, the Saturday live call-in show is now an interactive video platform called the Planetary Healing Club. The cost is just a $10 minimum monthly donation, automatically billed through your PayPal account. Sign up at lostartsradio.com/club. The Planetary Healing Club is every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You get your link to participate in the show upon signing up as a member. Those shows are also archived as well for club members. Listen to our new shows with guests every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. All Sunday shows with guests have archives freely available on our website at lostartsradio.com. You can also find them at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/lostartsradio. Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/lostartsradio. And finally, look us up under the podcast directory on iTunes. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/lostartsradio or on Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. Be sure to join the free Lost Arts Radio Facebook group as well. Just search for Lost Arts Radio Group within Facebook. You can also join our forum on our website if you want to interact with other listeners. We also have links to all of the great independent musicians whose music we feature each week on Lost Arts Radio. When you do your Amazon shopping, please use Amazon's Smile program at smile.amazon.com. And when you choose Lost Arts Research Institute in Sedona, Arizona as your charity, Amazon will donate 0.5% of whatever your order total is to Lost Arts Research Institute to help fund the building of the school and keep our radio show on the air. Please visit lostartsresearchinstitute.org for more information on the school we want to build. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter on our site under the Radio Show tab or right from the button on our Facebook page. Contact Richard at richard@lostartsradio.com or myself, Doug Diamond, at doug@lostartsradio.com. Thanks again for listening to Lost Arts Radio, and we'll see you again next week.
No clue, didn't know what to ask. The river was flowing, time it had passed. Don't know what I got till I know that it's gone. Seems like it's right till I know that it's wrong. It's there right in front of me, seems far away. Is there any way I can go home? the distractions, look straight ahead. I'm getting pushed sideways, off track instead. Look for the moment when nothing is real. I look for the magic when touch turns to feel. It's there right in front of me, seems far away. Is there any way I can go home? Here I am again, Lake in Hennepin, thinking about life, the way that things might have been. Anyway, I can go home. I got no answers, I'll tell you about it. Not hard to figure, there's no doubt I wanna go home. Is there any way I can go home? Here I am again, Lake in Hennepin, thinking about life, the way that things might have been. Anyway, I can go home.